This is the Coming Home Podcast with John Allen. We're live. Hi, Karyn.
Hi.
You definitely make things interesting for me. As I said before, I've known you, so to speak, through social media for a couple, 3 years. You know, you're in the Americans in Norway group as well. And from what I've seen, you've got quite an interesting life. Is it correct to say you are an academic?
Oh.
Is it correct to say you're an academic and an artist of sorts?
Well, among other things.
There's more to it, but are those two things correct?
I have a strong creative streak.
Let's talk about that. What do you create?
What do I create? I've written a couple of books. I do video and photography.
Mm-hmm. Now that's your own. That's your own photography.
I have a
business.
studio. Yeah.
Yeah. You rent out your services as an independent photographer, correct? Or do you work for any publications?
No, actually, I have all of the things that I would have said about myself about 15 years ago. All of the answers I would have given to questions that you're asking me would have been so different.
How so? That's interesting.
Well, I moved to Norway same time you did, I think, about 22 years ago.
2002? Yeah.
Yes.
I came 5th of June, 2002.
I came on the 30th of June, 2002.
Well, how about that?
Wow.
We just missed each other on the flights there.
So, before I left, I had written my first book, and I had been running a secondhand shop, like a consignment shop for baby stuff. I had 2 small children from my first marriage. And I had, I was doing mosaics in my basement, and I had my little hobbies. And I was very, very absorbed in the autism parent support community. When I moved to Norway, I was able to kind of reinvent myself. And I think a lot of people who emigrate to a new country, or even just sometimes move to a new state or a new city, find that they have a little more time to reflect.
Oh, absolutely. It's almost forced upon us, that reflection.
Yeah, and we don't have as much sort of stimulation. The phone isn't ringing all the time. Mm-hmm. And we're busy learning. Everything we're doing is learning. It's to me, it was almost like I'm right-handed. It was like having my right hand tied behind my back, and having to learn to do everything with my left hand. And it wasn't that I couldn't do it. It was just everything was that much little bit harder. And I was in love, madly in love, which amazingly I still am after all this time. And figuring out all the logistics, but also there's a kind of a mental process that goes on that says, who am I here? Who was I there, and who am I here?
Let's back up a little bit. When you came here, was it for work? Was it for love? Was it for both? What were the circumstances of you coming to Norway? From New York?
From New York. What else brings a nice New York girl to Norway of all places? No, my husband and I met through our autism parent support network, and when it turned out that we had both been separated at the same time. We went from being colleagues who just knew each other with a certain amount of mutual respect to really getting into, when you meet a stranger on a train and you think you're never going to see them again, so you really open up to them.
Yeah.
I never thought I was going to meet him, and we really talked about what we learned, what we wish we'd known, the things that we were missing, the ways that we didn't communicate in ways that we should have, the ways that we weren't there for our partner and that they weren't what we needed at that stage in our lives.
So you two were in the same space in
very
your
much
lives.
So, at exactly the same time.
Yeah.
So
it's quite unique.
Yeah. Well,
it's one of those meant to be situations.
I think so, because we'd been aware of each other for quite a long time, maybe 10 years or something, or about something like that. And so, and even written to each other just professionally. Yeah. And this was. It was quite beautiful having a friend on the other side of the world. But we very quickly realized that we had a very strong commonality in the things that we thought were interesting, the things that we thought were important,
Yeah.
the ways that we wanted to be in the world and be there for a new partner when that should happen.
Mm-hmm.
I think we went from writing sort of one email a day at that point to maybe 5 a day to basically being on, back then, AOL, instant messaging. And just feeling this very powerful pull. And so I came here for 4 days.
Uh-huh.
And we met, and I went home and had a conversation with my ex-husband,
Mm-hmm.
Who said that he would be supportive of trying to figure things out with the kids. And I started packing. So it was a very
wow. So you knew.
Sometimes
you
just
knew.
know.
Well, and what a blessing that your ex-husband was cooperative when it comes to the kids. And I don't know if he stayed that way, but it sounds like at least in the beginning there was the intention of there being 100% cooperation with.
Yeah, we really were able to work together. I mean, divorce is never without a certain amount of disagreement, but
sure.
No, I think we did a pretty good job, and we were able to stay friends.
Good.
Logistically, it was more complicated than I
Good for
thought.
you. Good for the kids.
Yeah, but blending. Jürgen had kids also, and blending families is
it's not an easy thing.
No, but I have always approached things with this attitude, like, oh, I can do it. I can do it.
Yeah.
And there's never a moment where I think, oh, I'm really not doing so well here. My optimism tends to pull me through. And his kids are great. And everybody, I think, had the right intentions.
Good.
The sadness and stress for children when they're experiencing divorce. It's unavoidable. It kind of doesn't matter what the situation is. Ultimately, my children, I think, have been very happy with the way things worked out. With the fact that I moved, I think at the time that I moved, it pulled them apart.
It just brings up a little sad nostalgia for me, because when I divorced my first wife, my son Johnny was 5, and it was just, without getting too deep into it, it was too much ugliness. And then when I ended up meeting Snoopy, and especially when I moved here, that jealousy came out and did very visible and significant and visible damage to the father-son relationship because of that lack of cooperation and jealousy and whatnot. So when I hear of someone who went through a divorce with children involved and it went relatively smooth, especially for the children, in the sense that you still had contact with them and there was a shared aspect to continuing to raise them.
Yeah, I mean,
beautiful.
I won't say we did a perfect job, but
well,
I think
who does do a perfect job?
The basic interest in making sure that they are also okay.
Yes,
I think that's what a lot of people lose, and also, I think Jürgen mentioned that when you're under a lot of stress and your adrenaline and stuff, your frontal lobes kind of shut down.
Yeah.
And so you hear a lot of people say, "Oh, my ex-wife is crazy," or "My ex-husband is out of his mind," and you're both sort of right, because when you're under stress and you're dealing with someone, you're really not at your best. You're not. Thinking,
it's
and your
impossible.
Empathy kind of goes a little down the tubes.
Well, there's an element of self-preservation that kicks in. You don't have room for that empathy sometimes.
And of course, looking back, it's very easy to kind of look back and go, I wish I'd listened more.
Yeah.
I mean, there must be things that you look back and in the beginning you might have thought, oh, she's this, and then afterwards you go,
no, she's still that.
There are probably ways that you realize that you could have contributed to a better outcome.
Whenever there's a divorce, 9 times out of 10, unless there's something such as violence, whether it's physical,
or
emotional, or mental, or mental illness, emotional violence, physical violence. If there's cases of that, well, then there is a clear person at fault in that marriage. However, looking away from those circumstances, a divorce is a failure on both spouses, on both sides. It's a failure. And the job should be to lessen the effects of that failure as much as possible when it comes to the children.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, that didn't happen in my case. Fast forward to me losing him to a heroin overdose in 2019. And the roots of that started back then.
Sure.
It's very clear. And it's a sad thing.
It's kind of hard to know with children what the effects of what we do are.
Yeah, we don't know.
How much of it is who they are and who they've always been and who they were meant to be.
Well, they have elements of themselves within them, I believe, at birth. And then the question is which elements are going to be enhanced and refined in a positive way, and which elements are going to be the catalyst for disaster later in life. And a lot of that depends on the actions of the parents.
Yeah.
The biggest influence on that child's life,
I don't know. I'm a little bit more in the camp. I used to be more in the nurture camp. And now I'm a little more in the nature camp. I really do think that temperament is kind of fixed from pretty early on. And the best thing we can do is keep them from getting too screwed up.
Well, at least temperamental tendencies, are there. But again, so that's nature, but then the nurturing, again, I believe can enhance or detract from
Maybe
those
I just want to let myself off the hook for the things
let's make ourselves feel good, okay?
Yeah, it's possible.
But when you came here, here's what I'm wondering. When you came here, and you touched on this, you said we have an opportunity to remake ourselves when we make a move, an international move like this from the United States to Norway. Did you have any idea about what your life was going to be like for you? Your how are you going to pass your time away from work, and what kind of a work were you going to do? Did you have those things clear when you came here?
I definitely did not.
Yeah.
I'm kind of an improviser.
Were you scared though?
So not at all.
Really?
Weirdly, no.
Uh-huh.
I knew that what I was doing with Jürgen was right, that he was this extraordinarily loving, supportive person who was going to be on my side no matter what. I loved the channel of communication, which was so
vital,
crystal clear.
Yes, that is vital in a relationship.
There was no pretense. And after, a first marriage where a lot of these walls build up, that was my number one. It would have been a deal breaker if I ever felt that he were not truthful. He is the guy who says, yes, that dress makes your butt look big. And I say, thank you.
Well, I take it a step further. There's nothing wrong with a big butt.
Well, there you go.
I've never seen a butt that's like Snoopy's on a white girl before. So, well, she's not a white girl. She's Samisk, and that's different.
Well, if I say something to Jürgen like, how does this look? He'll say, you look beautiful in everything. And it's not flattery. He means it.
Yeah.
And
you know the difference.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of knowing the difference, do you feel that you could have as good of a relationship as you obviously have with Jürgen if you hadn't
Absolutely
gone through?
not.
How so? Can you expand on that, please?
Well, first of all,
did you have to suffer before you could find joy?
Absolutely.
Okay, expand on that, please.
Well, first of all, the choice that I made when I was 23 was to choose somebody who was a good, kind person and was super bright and super interesting, and that I had lots and lots of fun with. And I craved adventure.
Yeah.
And I knew that it would take me a long time to plumb the depths of his mind. His communication wasn't great. His social skills weren't great. I would not say that he was neurotypical. And that was okay. Like I said, I can deal with this. I know that there are gaps here, but I'm all for that. I didn't realize how hard that was going to be for me when things got difficult. So if things had been relatively smooth sailing in our lives, it might have been okay. When my son got sick, it put a lot. He was quite ill as a baby. He's doing beautifully now, but
good.
It put a lot of strain on our marriage that the marriage was not strong enough to take. I overestimated what I was capable of. And that's actually been a theme in my life. I tend to overestimate what I'm capable of, which means I get more done, I think, than most people.
Yeah.
But it means I hit the wall a little bit more often.
There's a little bit of duality to that situation. I can see the benefits and
yeah.
the things that may detract from your...
And it used to be automatic, and now it's I choose it. Now I choose to say, boldly go. And sometimes I run up against a force field or something. But
well, how do you handle it when you meet that resistance? Do you handle it well, or do you beat yourself up?
No, I often just go look for the next shiny thing. But,
okay, yeah. You kind of take that loss, learn from it, and move on.
Yeah, I think so.
Well, that's a good quality to have, because life is full of opposition, and the quality of our life very often is dependent upon how we react to that opposition.
I mean, if we think about what we value in ourselves, right? I do value my flexibility, my open-mindedness, a lot of these things. But mostly what I value is relationships, like other people, other people's feelings, success. These are so important to me. And no matter where you are, relationships are everything.
Yes.
So if you think about being an immigrant to a new country, those talents of flexibility of going, I'm going to start a business in a new country after only studying the language for 1 year. That was a bold thing to do. And some of that I got right, and some of that I was overly optimistic about. But as long as you have strong relationships, as long as you are able to embrace other people and listen to other people and enjoy other people and make them feel appreciated and genuinely appreciate them, then you're a lot better off no matter where you go.
Do you have a lot of close friends now?
I do. I do. Norwegians, though, I was quite lucky because I like Jürgen's family quite a lot. So I sort of had a built-in community when I came. And it turned out that the same day that I moved to Norway, another family had moved there. And the husband is an organic farmer, and he took over his uncle's farm. And the wife is an artist. And she had been living in Oslo and was a much less small town girl. We live in Sarpsborg, which is a pretty small city. We'd call it a town in the U.S., but they call it a city here.
I like it out there. It's very charming.
Yeah, it is nice. But she and I just sort of glommed onto each other, and so having
this is an American who.
No, she's Norwegian.
Okay,
but she's a very open, intellectually curious.
Yeah.
She loves to travel. She loves to meet new people. So she was much more open to me, I think.
Okay.
Plus, we were neighbors. They were just across the road. And I loved that she didn't think like me. We tend to just start to absorb friendships, especially as we get older, the ones that we want to invest our time in when we have less time.
Don't we learn the most from the people who are least like us?
Yes.
It's that differentness that can be so attractive in a friendship.
But it's very convenient to choose people who get you right away, and and I think that is my tendency. And this was, if we'd been in high school together, we wouldn't have been friends.
No.
Because she's cool. She's so cool.
Okay.
And I wouldn't say nerdy, but I was in case you hadn't guessed, a Star Trek geek. And,
no, actually, I never would have thought Star Trek.
Well, I did say something about a force field.
That's true. You did say, okay. Yeah. I need to pay more attention because you did mention that.
And boldly go.
And boldly go.
Yes. No, but there's that. I wasn't nerdy, but I was, sort of
geekish.
Let's just say
I talk about this with my daughter all the time. What's the difference between a geek and a nerd? And I think I've come to the conclusion that there is no difference because she is both. Yeah. And I say this because I know she's going to be listening to this. So I tease because I love.
Well, let's just say I'm geek adjacent.
Geek adjacent. Yeah, we'll take it. We'll take that.
So I'm geek friendly.
So when you came here, this whole thing, the newness of Norway with a new language and at least a slightly different culture, there was nothing fearful about that to you. There was no looming challenge.
No, and I think it's partly because I was married to a Norwegian. When I think about people who come here as refugees,
Totally different issue. I talk about that all the time. Yes.
That must be terrifying.
Yes.
Just terrifying. Not to mention if they look different, if they have different color skin, if they have very different dress, for example, then they're feared.
Here's where perspective, here's where perspective comes in handy. In some of the work that I was doing a few years ago, I had a lot of contact with newcomers to Norway, refugees, and the stories of tragedy in these different lives were. It was almost overwhelming to hear about it. So then think about them actually living through it, and they have children and the family that was left behind either because they couldn't get out or because they were, they lost their lives. So we as American, and I'm not trying to say I have no sympathy or empathy for Americans in Norway who have struggles, but let's put things into perspective. It's we can get through this a lot quicker than most refugees.
Sure.
People who are seeking asylum. So let's keep that in perspective. And I think, how do I say this? I don't want to downplay any struggles that Americans in Norway have, because and some of you out there are struggling greatly. But I think that the sense of community that we have needs to somehow be implemented into these refugee communities. I think that is the biggest element that is missing in the refugee asylum seeker, if you will, environment here in Norway. And I believe that lack of cohesive support is the biggest problem with immigration in Norway.
Yes, absolutely.
Would you agree with that?
Oh, sure.
I talked a little bit with that about that with Jørgen, that it's a two-way street. Norwegian society has a responsibility to accept, but that environment of refugees also has a responsibility to fit in. But when you don't have that cohesive community thing like we have as Americans in Norway, you're almost doomed to if not to fail, to be faced with a huge amount of challenge.
Right. And I'm an American Jew from New York City. So my history is my grandparents came across on the boat, for a better life.
From
Russia. And my father from Egypt, actually. He's a Sephardic Jew. So I think the motto, more or less, for many Jews who come to America, not for the more Orthodox ones in general, but is assimilate while maintaining your culture.
Yes.
And I think that at least visible assimilation is so important.
Visible. What does that mean?
Visual, maybe.
Yeah, but in what sense when it comes to fitting into a new society?
Okay, so I don't look Norwegian. I look a little exotic, but I'm white, right? And so if I dress American, it's not that different from the way Norwegians dress. They watch a lot of American television.
Norway is very Americanized.
Yes.
Yes.
So it's only when I open my mouth that they can start making some judgments about me. And if the first thing they see from me is a big smile, that goes a long way.
It sure does.
And I'm a pretty smiley person.
Yeah.
So when I open my mouth, I usually open it warmly.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And I think that comes from lack of fear. I'm not afraid.
Good point. Good observation.
I'm not afraid that someone's going to dislike me.
Mm-hmm.
And when I talk to my Black friends in New York, who I grew up with from school, they say it very much has to do with fear of that they might be threatening. Especially in New York City in the 1980s, there was a huge poverty problem. There was huge, racial differences.
What part of New York were you?
Manhattan.
Manhattan.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I went to a public school.
Okay.
And I was kind of on the border of like Spanish Upper West Side.
Okay. Yeah.
And so what they said worked best for them when they met someone new was to understand that what they had to overcome was fear. And as you have said before, that it's about education in a way, not meaning I'm more educated, so I'm less prejudiced, but saying the more I educate myself about this individual, the less the racist tendency is going to be there, right? So, what they've expressed to me is make sure that they don't feel threatened when I meet them, and it changes everything.
Yes.
And that's just natural for
me.
And
it's the smile that goes a long way towards putting people at ease.
Sure. Now, I lived in Rochester, New York for 10 years.
Okay.
That's where I raised my kids when they were little.
Yeah.
And I have to say, Rochesterians are a lot less welcoming than Norwegians, in my opinion.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
A lot less welcoming than Norwegians.
Oh, yeah. If anybody wants to
in Østlandet, Norway. Really?
Yes. Oh, yes.
Boy, now that's a strong statement.
If
you heard it here on Coming Home with John Allen. That is a strong statement.
If anyone wants to feel really shut out and othered, that's the place to do it. And
well, let's admit it. That exists in America. I talked about it a couple episodes ago when Snoopy and the Babies and I were traveling last year from Washington, D.C. and up to my people in Ohio. And we drove through this creepy little town. Well, it wasn't creepy. It was actually kind of charming. It was beautiful, actually. This little town in south central Pennsylvania. I cannot remember the name of it, but one of those side roads. It wasn't a main highway, and we were met with just the ugliest stares and looks in this little diner in this town. And I'm like, where am I, Hoksund? No, this is in the United States.
Oh, sure.
You know, so we have that as well.
Oh, having a New York license plate when you drive through the Deep South is enough to get people.
Oh, yeah, you Yankees.
Know. Yeah, exactly. So, but if you think about it, there is a parallel between Rochester, New York, and
I need to write that down. Stay out of Rochester.
No, it's a wonderful city, and it's probably changed a bit now too. But the reason that it was, you could almost say like Norway back then in the 90s, is that it had been. It was the whole city was based around industry. Kodak was there. And so Kodak was the driving force. Yeah. Everybody either worked for Kodak or a family worked for Kodak. And once you got in at the age of 18, 19, 21,
you're in. You're set for
You're
life.
in, and you worked for them for life. You got the gold watch and at the end.
Yeah.
And so nobody left. Like New York, people were always coming and going.
Yeah.
But nobody left. They were all there for life. And it's a bit of the same thing, is that you had your friends, you had your family. You didn't really need anyone else.
No.
So in the 10 years that I was there, right after my daughter was born, I started a play group. And all of the women who joined that play group, except one, were newcomers to the town, because they didn't have their aunts and their sisters and everybody.
Yeah.
So we just kind of bonded together, and really all of my friends were from somewhere else.
Very interesting.
And there are many times where you think, is it just me? Is it something about my personality? And yeah, I think there is a New York Jewish thing that might come on a little too strong. There's interrupting. There's a kind of a rhythm to the language. And so, that might have put some people off too. And it might do that here too.
When you speak of these things, the rhythm of the New York Jew, the exclusive element in Rochester, New York, and you're talking about these different social realities in different areas of the United States, I think that is something that maybe we forget. I mean, I can remember when I first came to Norway, and Norwegians would talk about America being just this one thing, this one image of all of America. And I would fire back and say, yeah, but America is different, because if you go here, it's this way. And if you go, and maybe I've forgotten, or I don't want to say I've forgotten, but I'm less aware of that now. Just hearing you talk about, because it's just, New York people have their own thing. And then within that, the New York Jew has their own thing. And then within that New York thing, the
New York
the black guy, the black guy or the Puerto Rican guy from the Bronx, and that's all within one city. You have these different little micro elements of society.
Oh, it's like saying, what's the weather like in the United States?
Yeah, you just can't. There's no answer to that.
But the reason that weather does affect how people are. right?
Oh, sure.
I mean, Minnesota has a lot of Norwegian immigrants who have been there for more than 100 years, right? But the ethos of sort of being a little introverted, being a little spread out from your neighbors. I think that's still there.
Small town Ohio, where I'm born and raised, is so different from the Chicago area where I worked in law enforcement.
You must have a lot of stories about that.
I do. And actually, one of my former guests, I'm working on putting this together, excuse me, but one of my former guests wants to actually flip it. They want to sit here and I'll sit there and they'll interview me because they want to ask me.
Oh, you can sign me up for that.
Well, okay. Well, let's talk about it one of these days because I do have a lot of stories to tell. There's a lot of humor in it, but there's a lot of tragedy. And there's a lot of things that I have learned that I think would be kind of fun to share. You know, everybody likes to talk about their life. I don't think there's anything egotistical in that. I look at it as a therapeutic process that I need to go through. So to have someone sit here and ask me those kind of questions, I would just love to.
Well, one of the things you and I have in common is just being really interested in other people and curious about other people, and also kind of obsessed with the things that go on in our own mind and what that can mean.
Yes.
You know, this preoccupation of like, I just had this thought. What does that mean?
I'm trying as hard as I can in a positive way to find out about other people, but I'm also trying to find out about myself.
Yeah. Essentially, I think that's
you have to be a little fearless to do that, because what if you find out, you know, we are all affected by both the good and the bad in our lives. And sometimes we can come to some rather frightening discoveries.
You know, I once had to do an exercise. I took a course that you could almost call like a self-improvement thing, but it was really about where do you go from here? You know, how do you take the things that you want? How do you get to leading the life that you love from where you are now? And one of the exercises, oh God, it almost broke me. You had to interview people who you were close to in your life. And you had to ask them something like 10 questions, like, would you go into business with me? Why or why not? You know, or and what qualities, what are the 3 qualities that you would most positive things that you would say about me? And what are the 3 negative things that you would say about me? And I was terrified, and I had to ask my kids too. So, what was amazing, I was so afraid of this exercise. And you start out by saying, I want you to be completely honest with me. I won't argue with you about any of this. And people say, oh, great. You'd think they'd be polite, but no, once you've given them permission.
They're ready to tear you down.
Right? Oh, sure. So I was really afraid, especially of interviewing one of my brothers with whom I have a fairly tricky relationship. So I was surprised to find how much people liked me and the many things that I valued in myself that they liked about me. And the things that they told me about myself that I didn't really want to hear, that were painful to hear, were all things I knew, but that I had pretenses about. And I think it's really interesting when other people break down your pretenses, and you can either fight back or you can go, this is information.
Did it move you towards the search for self-improvement then? These things now that I've been ignoring or pushing aside, now I'm going to work on it. Did you do that?
Yeah. Well, I think what it taught me was that everybody sees through us, you know, as soon as you get to know anybody. I mean, our kids know us. We can't pretend to be something that we're not around our kids, right?
No.
That's why I think parents who are getting divorced shouldn't bother trying to paint themselves in a better light, because your kids are going to, they might be biased in the beginning, but they're going to figure it out eventually. So I think it helped me, first of all, we all have these fears that other people don't like us. It helped me to go, oh, people actually do like me. And there's no point in faking that I'm not a little bossy, you know, or a little this. But the positive things did outweigh the negative. And then when I interviewed the difficult brother and asked him for adjectives, what struck me the most was that the word that everybody used for me, one of the 3 words, was compassionate. Right. And I thought, I love that, because that's important to me.
Yeah.
And this brother said, in the qualities that I lack, number one was compassion.
Okay.
Right? And I thought, what is it that I am with him?
Did you figure that out? What was?
I think so, but that would take up a whole episode. No, but then you really start getting.
Well, some of the most. I'm sorry to interrupt, but some of the most. Without putting too much of my business out there, because I don't want to hurt anybody, but some of the two of the most complex relationships I have, and by complex I mean challenging at times, relationships that I have is with my brother and my sister.
Sure.
I wonder what that's about.
Yeah. Well, I think with him there are buttons that get pushed by some people and not others. But I'm extremely close with my other siblings. And for whatever reason, who we are just really pushes each other's buttons. And so what I got was 99 people can call you compassionate. One person can say that you're not. And that doesn't make you either. The majority doesn't rule. A compassionate person is going to be compassionate 100% of the time. And something about the way I approached my brother was unsympathetic.
Yeah.
And whether I could justify it to the ends of the earth, well, of course I'm unsympathetic because you did this.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter because I still
you're still unsympathetic.
And and it meant that I was being out of character with who I wanted to be.
Yeah.
Right. So and it helped when I moved to Norway, and one of my stepdaughters was very confrontational. She was 16. They're a real pain in the ass.
They're allowed to be confrontational.
I don't think they're allowed to be, but they.
Well, it's understandable. Well, it's understandable.
Yeah.
Well, I'm thinking in the context of she's your stepdaughter. You're the new.
I was
lady.
The interloper that moved, and I moved into a house that was one of their houses. So
it's kind of understandable.
They did have two places. So
I'm not saying she was right, but it's kind of understandable.
Yeah,
for a 16-year-old.
Oh yeah. No, and I got that, but she had this way of like trying to control the situation, kind of control the conversation all the time.
Yeah.
And I remember
she should have been a podcast host.
Done something. Yes, she would be great at that. She's a bright human. But there was something like she always managed to get out of doing dishes, Oh, I have to go do this thing. I'll do it later, And I was really feeling angry and snippy. And I don't like being angry and snippy. So I remember I got into the shower and I thought, I hate her. Why does she make me so not nice? And I realized that was the problem. I didn't hate her. She's a lovely person who was going through a really hard time. I hated that she made me not nice, right? And then I came up with what I named after her, this rule, which is that it's easy to be nice when other people make it easy to be nice.
Yeah.
And it's hard to be nice when other people make it hard to be nice, like my brother, for example. And a nice person is nice even when other people make it hard to be nice, right?
Yeah.
So I got out of the shower, I got dressed, I went downstairs. I'm in the kitchen. She walks in, she puts her hands on her hips and she says, "This place was a lot cleaner when my mom lived here." And I had some choice words that wanted to come out of my mouth. I thought, wait. Right.
Here's an opportunity.
And I just said, "Really? Huh." And she just started sputtering. Wait, what just happened? And that's
she was expecting some serious pushback.
Yeah, and
she probably meant what she said to be an insult.
Yeah,
and she was,
but I just kind of went, okay, you feel that way, and fair enough, sure. We suddenly had 6 kids.
Well, isn't it about being a social acrobat? You have to have a certain social balance to where when to push, when to just take it and be quiet.
Yeah,
sure. And in the end of it all, you have to think, or I think, with my kids, this is a 16-year-old boy. I have to expect that he's going to act like a 16-year-old boy, and through that knowledge, I'm going to tamper my response to some of the things that 16-year-old boy says or does, right? You have to be an acrobat and just flow with the...
It's hard with teenagers, though, because
of course
they seem so adult, right?
Yes.
And you start thinking
they
of
can
them
surprise
as adults,
us.
and then they just do something so immature and annoying. And I think we also have some fear around them. Like if they're acting this crazy... Maybe I'm doing something wrong. Maybe I'm doing a bad job. Maybe I'm falling short. They just said this rude thing. I didn't teach them that. What am I missing? You know, so we tend to blame ourselves when our kids are not at their best. And also we were fearful for them, like they make a bad choice or they have a friend that could lead them astray. And we get very scared. So I think a lot of the way we approach our teenagers is with a certain amount of fear. And that's why they do better with an aunt or an uncle or somebody.
That's a good point.
Who
loves, a little bit removed.
Who loves
them, but they're a little removed. A little,
They're not afraid.
Yeah.
You know, if you have a parent with a depressed or suicidal child, they're going to be in a panic state all the time.
Constant.
And that's not what the kid needs, right? No. But an aunt or uncle can go, I love you. I don't want you to die.
Yeah.
But it's not as emotional.
They're one step removed.
Yeah, so that's that's why it takes a village to raise a child, right?
You mentioned I don't know if it was on camera or before we started, but you said something about you're getting your studio in order. Yeah. What kind of studio?
Right. So when I moved to Norway, the thing that I did, which was somewhere between brave and stupid, was I noticed that there were no women's only gyms here. And I wanted one. I don't like working out in a, testosterone-laden environment. And so I started one, just a tiny little one on the main Gågata, the pedestrian street in Sarpsborg. And it was circuit training. It was like a 30-minute workout, and you got in and got out.
Did you have any investors, or did you foot
we just
foot the bill yourself?
I did it as cheaply as you possibly could. I bought some equipment from the U.S. and scraped it together. I think we did it for under $10,000, and
very doable.
Yeah, and it sort of turned into 3 gyms and then 5 gyms, and then we franchised, and there were like 30 plus gyms, and I'm not.
Did you say 30?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I'm not a great...
You mentioned the franchising thing before. I didn't know it got that big.
Yeah.
Wow,
yeah.
Excellent.
And we sold the franchise to someone else at one point because we wanted to get out.
You want to say what it was called?
It was called Innersvingen, which means kind of the short way, the shortcut. So you go in a circle here, but then you can do the whole workout in 30 minutes, kind of. I came up with that.
Ah, awesome.
Yes.
Oh, that's a great pitch. That's
yes,
and it's when I think of the type of clientele that would be interested in that. See, this interests me because I had 3 gyms also at one point, and to think of the type of clientele that would be attractive to, that is a perfect concept. It's a low. To me, it speaks of lower intensity, more quiet, safe,
and
insular.
If you think, all right,
insular.
Think about women in their 40s. And 50s, right?
There you go.
Maybe they've never gone to a gym before.
Yep.
Maybe
intimidated by the whole concept.
Maybe they were a stay-home mom.
Yeah.
Right? They haven't been in the workforce. They haven't been going to the gym.
Yep.
And they walk into a place like Sats, which is a full-service gym chain, right? Nice place. But they walk in there and they turn around and walk right back out again, right? Yeah. This was very accessible. The bar for getting in was low. The problem with circuit training is unless you mix it up with other stuff, it can be very tedious after a while.
Yes.
So member retention wasn't great.
They graduate to a different level, if you will.
If we're successful at getting them confident and in shape and they lose a few pounds and they start to realize they're stronger, then they can go to Sats and have a great time.
Yeah.
So member acquisition wasn't the problem, but retention was.
Retention.
So, and I think that's always the problem with gyms. You get people who sign up with the best of intentions on January 3rd, and then, right.
Well, yeah, I was lucky when I started because this was up in northern Norway, up in Nordreisa, in Nord-Troms, and then on Skjervøy, also in Nord-Troms, and then in Tromsø. Where I had 3, and the one in Tromsø, of course, was in a city, but in Nordreisa and on Skjervøy is way out in the districts, and there were no gyms to speak of. Right. There was one place that was run by some physical therapists and chiropractor, but it wasn't a gym gym,
Right.
if you know what I mean.
No, in a small town, you get better word of mouth, and
that's the thing. Yeah,
you were the only baker making
exactly.
bread,
So
right?
the retention was great because this was a community, an area out in the districts that had never had anything like that before. But at the same time, I found a challenge, at least in the beginning phase, and maybe this was mostly in my head. Maybe I could have just put any type of equipment in there and they still would have come. But I needed to make sure that I got, the advanced lifters, if there were any out there, or maybe the guys and girls who wanted to be advanced lifters. But I also needed the people who were maybe in bad shape, needed to lose a lot of weight, the housewife, the guy who's way out of shape with a pot belly. So to choose the right kind of equipment was a challenge, but we put together a concept that appealed to all that. We had a circuit training area. We had a hall where they could do a Zumba.
Yeah, sure.
I was actually the first the first male to be a certified Zumba instructor north of Trondheim.
Oh, that's great.
Way back in the day. So
yeah.
I'm kind of proud of that.
No, the key to success and longevity and exercise is to do things that you enjoy.
Yeah, you got to have fun while you're doing it. Otherwise, you're going to get burnt out.
And you have to have diversity in the kind of equipment that you use, right? So having circuit training and weightlifting and this and that. But I think group exercise classes appeal to women the most. And actually that takes me to the next step in my career here, which was that I was on a research trip in the U.S. Visiting other circuit training gyms to find out why some of them had closed.
Okay.
There's a gym in the U.S. called Curves that had a similar concept.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of them were closing, and I wanted to know why.
What'd you come up with?
You have to mix it up. You have to have other stuff besides circuit training. Again,
because they do graduate to
because either that they graduate once they've got it, or they're not really gym people and they weren't going to stick with anything.
Okay.
So I had members who lasted 2 years or 3 years or whatever from the beginning, but most people get bored. Right, with exercise, especially something happens, you start building up, you get really strong, you're really feeling good, and then you get a back spasm, or you go on vacation, or something else. It's so hard to get back into the swing of it.
Talking about consistency with physical fitness and training, did you find that the more your business expanded, the less time you had for your own healthcare and training, or were you able? Yeah, because maybe it was after I opened the second one, I came to the realization that I am a gym owner
who doesn't work out. Yes.
I'm preaching consistency. I did a lot of personal training at my gyms as well. I put my own personal touch on it. So I would train my clients, and it's like, I trained 5 clients today. When am I going to train myself?
Yeah, sure. Well,
so
the shoemaker's kids go barefoot, right?
But how involved were you then in the? I mean, you can get caught up in the economy of it, the bills and tax preparation and all that stuff.
What? I think it's as simple.
Did you get on the floor and actually?
I did, but I think it's as simple as I got bored.
Okay.
It's that simple, and we'll talk another time about ADHD, which I have.
I'll say this: undiagnosed, but
mine has been diagnosed in 2 countries.
Well, there you go. Congratulations. No, I've come to the conclusion that yes.
Yeah. Well, you asked about my studio. We'll circle back to that too, because I am actually going to be working on a documentary this fall.
Yeah, you mentioned that. What's that going to be about?
It's going to be about adult ADHD. People who are undiagnosed, people who are diagnosed, medication, stigma, success stories, struggles, personal experiences, what happens when we're children and we realize we're out of step with not being able to do what some of the other kids are doing, the self-esteem issues that go along with it, the disadvantages professionally.
What about adults who find out that they're out of step?
Well, I think that's mostly who we're not going to be talking about kids with ADHD. There have been a million a million bits of information about that already.
Now there's people out there who say if you are an adult and you haven't been diagnosed for ADHD, well, then you don't have ADHD. What do you say to that?
It's absurd. It's like saying you don't have celiac disease if you've never had a small bowel biopsy, right? So it's like saying a study is false or a concept is false because there's never been a study, right?
Can I ask if you are medicated for ADHD?
I was for a little while. And then I stopped for about 20 years. When I moved to Norway, my life got so much calmer and simpler.
Do you think that was in itself medicinal? A different lifestyle?
I think learning a new language and kept my busy brain occupied. But also a tired brain is a distractible brain.
Yes.
So, and I once had a neurologist say to me, lucky me, I also have epilepsy. So I was having a lot of breakthrough seizures, and the neurologist said, an ADHD brain functions least well when it's exhausted, and your brain is exhausted. And I just said, yes, it is. It's exhausted.
You understand me.
Yes. And it's exhausted even without the epilepsy. But of course, seizures will wipe your brain out too.
Sure.
So I'm lucky I got the best kind of epilepsy you could have. But
the best?
Yes, because I don't lose consciousness. They're called focal seizures. But it's temporal lobe seizures, which in my case is where the language centers are. So it's a kind of a wacky little constellation of things that happen. And but the gist of all this is that my brain works really, really, really hard. And when there's less stimulation, like in a peaceful country like Norway,
yes,
like when you take a New York City girl and you move her to a småbruk, which is a small holding, a little tiny farm in the country, an hour outside of Oslo, you get an environment that I could function very well in. So, but for the past few months, I have been reevaluating whether I want to take medication. I've already spoken with a psychiatrist about it. He actually prescribed some, but I haven't started taking it yet. Do you fear taking it? Because there are side effects from time to time. I really
especially in the start phase.
Because I had a good experience with just plain old 4-hour Ritalin. So in the past, so I know what to expect, and it wears off after 4 hours. And my idea is I could take a dose in the morning and just get things done that I need to get done, and then let it wear off so I don't have a rebound or so that I don't have trouble sleeping. And so I'm thinking about it. But right now we're tinkering with my epilepsy medicine, so I don't know when I'm going.
Might want to wait.
Yeah.
But your documentary then is going to be about your experience, or are you going to bring in other people's experiences?
No, it's not going to be just me. Much as I'd love to just sit for 2 hours and talk about myself. Right. No, it's very much going to be for adults who have ADHD. It's going to be for adults who have ADHD but don't really know enough about it, or have a lot of frustrations, don't have much information, don't have a feeling of being okay, feel like they're broken. It's going to be for family members of adults with ADHD, so they can have a little bit more empathy, maybe lose a little bit of the frustration they have. Because living with a person with ADHD can be intensely frustrating, especially if their logistical skills are not good, and especially if their natural temperament moves toward being very flexible about everything.
And I would say it's especially difficult if that ADHD is undiagnosed, because you don't know why things are happening.
Right. So you just end up angry with them. Why couldn't you remember this thing? How could you go on a camping trip without a tent?
Yeah. Things,
And why are you losing things? You are always 15 minutes late whenever we're supposed to do something. There's a lot of stuff that we hear from an early age that tells us that people don't like us, or that people are frustrated with us. And I think it's going to help family members go, oh, this is a neurological difference. This person, when they're staying up too late, or they're surfing the web looking for interesting, stupid videos, they're dopamining, meaning they're trying to find the dopamine that they just naturally don't have. So it's not, you don't take vitamins because you already got enough in your system. You take vitamins because you think you might be a little deficient, and this is supplementing. So you can think of Ritalin as being vitamin R. It's some of us or vitamin D for dopamine, or vitamin N for norepinephrine, and the things that are just low, naturally low. In certain situations, when we were evolving in like deepest Africa, all of us, by the way,
say it for the folks in the back.
some of us probably didn't need to be sitting in a classroom paying attention.
This life we live these days, this is so far from natural for us as human beings.
You wanted people in the community who could be a little bit more bold and fearless and confident, and we're not shamed for it, and we're not walking around feeling broken. They were the coolest, bravest hunter.
They were the leaders.
Very often, especially if they had a temperament that was a little bit more structured, that's the hard part for me. Is I am a fly by the seat of the pants person naturally, but as you mature, hopefully you balance. You become more toward the center line.
I think I'm still looking for that balance.
Oh, we got a lot to talk about.
When it comes to the production of this documentary that you're working on, excuse me, is this a one-woman show? Are you the camera person? Are you the writer?
No, actually.
What kind of support do you have?
So I'm working with a documentary filmmaker who's Norwegian. He also has ADHD. And so he
independent filmmaker, or
no, he works he actually has he works through an educational organization. So he's just finishing up a documentary right now. And so he and I are going to start together in the fall. And we connected because I sold him some bar stools, like one of those things. But he came to pick them up at my studio, which I'm still getting ready to launch. And
how big is the area for your studio?
My studio isn't huge, but it's pretty big. I don't remember what it is in square meters, but there's room for an interview sofa. There's room for all the lights and equipment, and there's a big white wall. There's a green screen, so, and there's a portrait wall. So I can do, hopefully, some photography myself to pay the bills. I can do some videography myself. I'd like to help people do online courses because I've written online courses.
What kind of course?
Mostly fitness education because, when I was on we can get back to ADHD. Yeah, see, now my mind is jumping all over the place right now.
But I'm curious about the course, the online course thing.
Well, what happened was I was on this research trip in the U.S. looking for fitness information for my gyms, and I came across this weighted hula hoop, and I picked it up, and I thought, I was never any good at hula hooping, but it was big. And if you know anything about physics, you go, spinning something bigger is easier than spinning something lightweight and small. And I spun it around after my second and third try. I went, this is fun. Then I thought, I'm feeling this in the gut. Like, this is pounding me, So I went back to Norway and I said to Jürgen, well, I called the company. I said, listen, I have 5 gyms here. Can I get a discount if I order 5 hoops? And they said, we'll give you a discount if you order $1,000 worth of hoops.
Okay.
And I thought, that's like 35 hoops, right?
Yeah.
And I said, okay. Right. And then I came home and I said, Jürgen, so I just spent $1,000 on hula hoops. And that gem, he knows me really well. He said, if your intuition told you to do that, that's what we're doing.
Yeah.
And so we sold all of those. And then we ordered another case, and then we ordered a pallet, and then we ordered a 20-foot container, and then we ordered a 40-foot container. And so we started out by distributing through our chain of gyms and through the franchise of gyms. And it's one of those things that if you see it online, you might not appreciate it. But when you actually hold it in your hand, you go, this is something cool. Men like it too because it's full circle training, and it beats up all of your all the core muscles. So if you use it for more than a couple of minutes on the first day, you'll even get bruises. But then after a week, you'll have a much stronger core. You won't get sore anymore because the body armor made out of the muscles that surround your core gets stronger. So it's a fast way of of full circle training for your core. So when that happened, we sold a lot of the hoops in Norway. We got a salesperson in Denmark, and suddenly I had a new career, and it was all
that's
about
a whole new
hula
business.
hoops.
Yeah.
And then at one point, some reporter for VG, a large Norwegian newspaper, called the gym and said to my manager there, "Do you have any classes? Because we'd like to send a photographer and photograph one of your classes." And she said, sure. Our first class is on Tuesday. Right. And then she hung up and was like, "Karyn, we have to come up with a class." So at that point, I knew enough about fitness to go, all right, what would you do with this big, padded, heavy thing that you would do in normal exercise classes? And I just came up with some moves and
your own routine. And
my own routine that I knew was based on sound fitness principles, right? Yeah. I'm not a fitness professional, but I had enough experience at that point.
Yeah, because I was going to ask you, what kind of education do you have in the fitness world, or are you self-taught? I don't have any education. I'm self-taught on everything I know.
My biggest fitness education was hating exercise. So, right. Which meant that I had to learn everything all about it. Learn all about it. No, my education is communications, literature, film. I went to film school. So I went to Columbia University Film School in New York with the interest in becoming a screenwriter, like adapting books for the screen, because I love to book. I love to read books and I love movies.
But when it comes to fitness, you are self-taught.
Totally self-taught, yeah.
And I have to say, as a former gym owner and as a competitive powerlifter, from what I've seen, it is the self-taught athletes, the self-taught trainers, and the self-coached competitors. All of those people do best, because there's this thing, at least here in Norway, where it's very popular to go to some sort of academy and they send you to Bali for 2 weeks and then you come back as a certified, and I put that in air quotes, certified personal trainer. And I don't know that type of personal trainer is prepared to actually train.
Everybody's different. I mean, you want to go to a doctor that's been to medical school, right?
I would think
there are some people who don't have any intuition, who can't look at your nails and go, "I think you're a little anemic," right? Well, and so it's good that they've got that medical degree, but there are people who could be a healer, a holistic healer, and take one look at you and go, "You're anemic."
Well, right? I guess, someone who is self-taught can be just as ineffective as someone who has a 2-week certificate from Bali. Yeah. But someone who is self-taught and has been a competitive athlete for over 40 years.
Well, that's passion. They have a passion about it. And a passion can go a long way, right?
Passion is contagious.
Right. And
but there's also a wealth of knowledge as well. What I'm saying is that person can build up a wealth of knowledge. And it's been to the detriment of Fitness Norway.
Oh, sure.
That those people are so often ignored, and the environment around fitness in Norway is very caught up in you have to have a piece of paper saying.
Well, I'll tell you a good story along those lines. When I realized when we've saturated the market here in Scandinavia, meaning 1 out of every 4 households in Norway and Denmark had one of our hoops.
That's so cool.
At that point, and then of course the market gets saturated. That's it. Mm-hmm. And at that point, I was getting ready to expand into England because I'd been selling hoops in my second language, right? Yeah, I wanted to do it in my first language. Yeah. And I thought, the English market's big. I didn't realize that big markets are not necessarily better than small ones, right? Because there's less word of mouth, there's more competition. Yeah. So, but what I did know was in order to have longevity, you couldn't just have a product. You had to have education around the product. Right. You had to have, especially with women for whom that product was the most successful, having hips helps, because not that you use your hips, but the hoop doesn't want to fall if there's a little something supporting it, right? So it was mostly a woman's preference to use those things. And so women do very well with group fitness. Like I mentioned before, group exercise, it's social. you have other people kind of counting on you and recognizing you. And
that was
hello.
Probably the most profitable, in terms of success, the most profitable
sure.
Wing of my gyms.
If a woman tells me that she doesn't like exercise, that's usually what I tell her: is find an instructor that you like, who motivates you, who smiles at you, who makes you feel welcome, who has music that you like, and do that. Go to group exercise classes. But what I did in England was I hired the best fitness instructors to be our master trainers. And they took some of my moves and they expanded them and developed them and came up with their knowledge of moves that work in yoga, Pilates, Zumba, other things. They were able to take that knowledge and then turn it into a really good workout program. Excellent. So then we suddenly had instructors all over. And then we had 700 instructors in England. And then 1,000. And so the numbers, and at that point we changed, in Norway, they were called Innersvingen Rockeringer, which means the name of my company. Rockeringer is hula hoops. When we went into England, we changed the name to Power Hoop.
Okay.
Right. Actually, when we moved into Denmark, we changed to Power Hoop.
Okay.
I came with that.
There you go. Little mismarketing here.
It turns out there was a company in the U.S. using that for one of their products, but but for the workout and the products, it was Power Hoop. And so we developed the Power Hoop workout, and that was just hugely popular, and it still is. We still have fitness instructors that we trained in 2011.
Yeah.
So who are teaching, 8-10 classes. Full classes per week. So it's really hard to break into the fitness industry, but people do this particular class and it's fun and it's effective and they see the results within a week or two, right? So I got super enthusiastic. I'm like, I've invented the best core training in the world. And of course I didn't invent it. People were using hula hoops since, like the Aborigines. So,
but this is your own twist on an existing concept.
Fitness with a twist is one of the things I came up with. Actually, there you go.
See, so this is this still available out there as an online course?
Yeah.
So it's still generating.
At one point, I realized that a lot of the British fitness instructors in more remote parts of Scotland or wherever didn't want to come down to Kent, where we were headquarters. I hired a couple of salespeople. And so we started having courses in these remote places where we maybe only had 8 people in the course. And then we decided we had to go online. And so before COVID happened, I already had a good course that I had written myself, but with a lot of feedback from these instructors, our master trainers.
Yeah.
And I had written the manual for the master trainers for the in-person courses. It was really a matter of adapting that manual
to video,
fitness course. Yeah. And I love online course architecture. For me, it's so intuitive. Like, as a learner who has struggled with picking up new concepts, I have a learning disability, right? Yeah. So I'm smart, whatever that means, but I'm slow to pick up some stuff.
Okay.
And that helps when you're a teacher.
Yeah.
Right? It really helps because you know how to explain things so that other people are going to.
Well, you've learned where the potholes are and how to fill them in so that the journey is smoother. You've lived it yourself.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And some people can glance at a problem and understand it immediately. But most of us need to see it or feel it or hear it or understand it.
Yeah.
And I like teaching the principles behind something because I feel like if you just say push button A and then push button B and then push button C, you're never going to learn how to use a computer, right? You have to understand the principles of anything to get really firmly into it. So I designed this course to be pretty accessible. And then, of course, we were able to train people all over Europe. And so I had it translated into French. I had the course translated into German.
Yeah.
We have it in Dutch, So we now have just a growing body of fitness instructors. And I was refining the course over a long period of time so that I think personally, it's fantastic. But then when my epilepsy started acting up, I had to sort of give away that part of the business.
Okay.
I was almost dysfunctional for 3 or 4 years because...
Really?
And I didn't realize what it was. I just was having so much trouble thinking. And I kept like learning new software, like, oh, we need a new platform for this course or for this thing we're doing. And then I would learn the software. I am kind of a computer geek too, right? So I would spend like all day Friday learning this new software, and I'd really have it down pat. And then Monday I'd get to my desk and go, we should really have a new platform for my, for this and for the course. And then I'll research software, and I'll download the software, and what's it already doing in my downloads folder, and and then putting the pieces together. And so I thought I was losing my mind. I really thought it was early dementia, and it was terrifying. Turns out after a long day of using my brain on Friday, I would have some of these focal seizures, silent seizures in a way, that wipe out you get amnesia for whatever was happening before that. So a lot of people, especially people who were close to me, were starting to go, I just told you all that stuff like a couple of days ago, and I got very good at making excuses.
Okay.
And, my staff was starting to get frustrated with me, and I was coming up, must have slipped through the cracks.
Oh gosh, that sounds so tiring.
There's a lot of stuff in my inbox.
Yeah.
It was exhausting.
Yeah.
And so when I got this new epilepsy diagnosis last November, I just said, I can't do this. They said you need to take time off and rest your brain and try this new medication. So that part of the business got pushed away.
I see.
The part of the business I will not let go of because I love it is I also started something called PowerHoop TV.
PowerHoop TV?
Yes. And that is videos that we had originally started using as training videos for our instructors. I use those as a basis for creating online workouts for the public.
Okay.
Yeah. And so then we've expanded that. We've had our master trainers in studios doing those. So now I'm flying them from England to Norway.
Okay.
To do these in my studio. Only I've been taking a break since November because I'm trying to let my brain heal. So,
but that process has already started.
Oh, we have PowerHoop TV up and running. I just haven't added any new videos since November, which is...
How do people find it?
Oh, powerhooptv.com.
Okay.
That's easy enough.
Mm-hmm.
And
do you also have a YouTube?
We do.
Okay.
We do. If you have a weighted hula hoop at home, or if you can pick one up somewhere, then you can do any of these. We have everything from beginner to advanced videos, but anybody can do any of them. Even if you pick an advanced video, you can just modify. You can just march in place when there are moves that you're not ready for.
PowerHoop TV.
PowerHoop TV, yeah. We don't really sell hoops here in Norway.
No, okay.
I'm not involved in that. There are other people selling hoops.
Okay.
The only thing I would caution people if they don't have a weighted hoop is don't get these flimsy little $10 things or 100 kroner things.
Spend a little bit and get the real thing.
Yeah, spend it at least 200, 300 kroner on something with good padding, with strong connectors. The best ones on the market are the ones that we developed ourselves. Well, one of the things I've done is product design.
Yeah.
And I've invented weighted fitness gloves and also the best weighted fitness hoop in the world. It's got adjustable weight and, all kinds of directionality.
Now, this interests me.
It's patented. I've even got a patent.
Well, isn't that quite the process? You design a product. How do you can you talk briefly and rather briefly about the process of getting that from concept to actually having a physical product?
Sure.
That whole manufacturing thing. How does that happen?
Right. So
if you can explain it briefly, maybe it's a little more detailed.
If you have a reliable factory contact in China or Taiwan, and they've been referred by somebody who's worked with them and can vouch for their honesty and consistency, and I don't mean that they're like dishonest necessarily, as there are cultural differences in the way we read language and the way we understand. So they may say, oh, yes, I can have that for you, and then not. But ones who somebody else can vouch for their ability to communicate well, clearly, and truthfully and accurately.
But how do you find the somebody else who can vouch? I mean, not everybody knows someone who has designed a product that's going to get manufactured in China or Taiwan.
It was after working with someone terribly untrustworthy that we learned our lesson. And I looked, well, you can go to Alibaba, for example, and look at reviews. But I liked the look of this company.
Okay.
And plus they used plastics that were non-toxic. They only use, because there are plastic softeners called phthalates that are carcinogenic, right? Yeah.
So it's a matter of doing some research and finding out their track record, finding out what kind of products they use.
Right. And when I was ready to invent the weighted gloves, the adjustable weighted gloves, they're not wrist weights, they're actually, I already had contacts in that factory. And I just said, hey, if I send you a prototype, can you make me something like that? And then I actually went out in person to meet them.
Okay.
So, after they made their first batch of hoops for us, and I really liked what they were doing, I went out and met with them and really formed a relationship, because relationships are really important in Asia, and they are to me too. And I talked to them about communication. I said, this is where we ran into trouble before. If you say no, I need it to be a no. And if you say yes, I need it to be a yes. And they said, okay, we can do that.
Good.
And I just really loved this company. And so they made me prototypes. We went back and forth with the gloves. And then I got a product I really liked. Those are called power gloves, actually. But the hoops, I decided when I invented my own hoop that I was going to have them manufactured in England.
Okay.
So we worked with a product designer, professional product designer. He came up with a portfolio of different suggestions. We sat down with the product designer, a plastics specialist, an engineer, 2 engineers actually, and a factory owner who had a plastics factory in England that would know what was possible and what wasn't.
Okay.
And so we all talked together about my fantasy of what I thought a good hula hoop should have: the size, the weight, the adjustability. It should have compression chambers. It shouldn't tear when it hit a wall. It shouldn't, it should be something you could dismantle with visible buttons, so you're not searching around under the foam for the buttons. Yep. And so the power hoop took 2 years to develop, and about 120,000 pounds, which is like $150,000. So you have to have capital also to do a really good job. Yeah. I fell short with the marketing somewhat, but luckily we already had channels. We sold through Amazon, we sold through our website. So you learn these things as you go along. I didn't go to business school, but much of what you learn there is intuitive. That's
interesting about this. Kind of goes back to my first question that I asked you. I asked you if you consider yourself an academic. Remember?
Yeah.
It's the first. And I made an assumption based upon the little you had told me about, having your gym franchise. So I'm thinking business degree.
Yeah, no.
Possibly,
actually, I think marketing is intuitive. I think business is intuitive. If you have a curious mind and you like going into rabbit holes, learning about stuff, the hardest thing about business is managing people. Yeah. Management, I think going to business school for management probably would have served me very well. Okay. Because, my natural intuition about how to manage people was totally wrong. I know how to get along with people, but to be able to say very straightforward and firmly to somebody, I don't like the way that's working and change tack.
That's
do it this way instead.
That's a leadership capability that I don't think you can learn in school.
No, I learned it the hard way by being what they call seagull manager, where you swoop in and you crap on everything and then you fly away. Yeah, no. And then I had to stop and self-reflect and go, what am I doing wrong? And then read a couple of books and go, oh, right. Oops.
Yeah.
And then only hire people with whom I had a rapport of good communication.
So important.
And in the beginning, I said, I'm only working with men from now on because they're not as, they're not as sensitive. So I had that kind of, which
I'm the opposite. When I look at,
well, I think I was wrong. And I did end up working with women who just had a business-like, straightforward, not insecure. This is a business conversation kind of attitude. But I think that was my first reaction was, women are too emotional. And
I tell you, I don't know that I can put words on it, but I just work better with women. I have a business thing going on back home. It's a long story. One of these days, I'm going to do a series on that. But everybody with whom I work, they're all female. They're all women.
And I
don't know what that's about. It's just, but that's the way it turned out.
Now I actually really like working with women. I think I like working with anybody with whom I feel I can communicate well.
And isn't that the bottom line?
Yeah.
The communication.
Yeah.
We have to wind this up. We've been talking for an hour and 22 minutes. We scheduled an hour. Now it's been an hour and 22. The conversation.
You might need to break this into two.
Not even close. Let me tell you, my longest episode so far is 3 hours and 59 minutes and so many seconds. Mm-hmm. Typically, I go 2.5 hours. So an hour and 22 minutes is kind of short, but the reason I'm shortening these episodes, compressing the format, is the challenge with post-production. Mm-hmm. I have some new equipment that I'm still in the process of learning how to use it in post-production. And oh my gosh, working with a 3-hour conversation, there's a big difference between doing that and a 1-hour conversation that needs the post-production.
Sure. I find filming to be really fun and exciting
and
interesting.
Yeah. And this isn't filming per se, but this is on film. And I just love
when I'm filming a fitness video, it's like I am on, because you have to be multitasking.
Yes.
All the things that aren't natural for me in a suppressed state, like in a baseline state. Yeah. But when I'm energized, my ADHD brain goes into hyperfocus. Yeah. I can do anything, and it's a great feeling. But then getting to the editing. Once I sit down, then I hyper-focus on the editing and I'm fine. But that's not the fun, shiny part. Right?
Yeah. So. Well, it's kind of like the recording process with my music. When I'm over there in that other corner and I'm recording something, and I have a new mixer. And so the whole thing about figuring that, I get so deep into it. And all of a sudden I'll look at the clock and have I been sitting here for 5 hours? Is it really 3 o'clock in the morning? And I just get caught up. I just get sucked into that world and time stops.
That's why it always surprises me when people think that ADHD means you can't focus.
Yeah.
They're like, but my kid can focus for hours on dinosaurs or on computers or on...
ADHD is so misunderstood.
Yeah. It's about attention regulation. It's difficulty in regulating your attention, putting your attention where it needs to be.
And I think it's important for me, like I said, I'm not diagnosed. However, when I came to the conclusion that, this ADHD thing is definitely in my life, just knowing that cleared up a few things and made life easier. Just knowing
that's why I think people should get a diagnosis if they're still troubled by the way they're functioning or the way they're doing emotionally.
Out. Yeah.
I think a diagnosis.
Yeah.
And even if it turns out that the professionals say you're not really diagnosable, you can at least say, I'm close enough that some of the techniques, some of the strategies, some of the things that can be done.
Exactly my point. Yeah. It gives you some tools with which to work.
Sure. Yeah. And everybody has some ADHD aspects to them.
Sure.
It's the question is whether a child is diagnosable.
Yeah.
It's because you intend to put them in a special program or you intend to medicate.
And being diagnosed is not the end of anything. It's a beginning of a new understanding.
Yes, I agree. I'm glad I have the diagnosis, though, because it takes me a little bit out of the Karyn's just weird and annoying. Puts me into
she is weird and annoying people, but there's a reason for it. So.
She's also neurodivergent, and that's kind of...
Okay. It's been a wonderful morning. First with Jürgen. Hi, Jürgen. He's way over there behind the camera.
My amazing husband.
And now your amazing husband. And now this conversation with the amazing you.
Well, thank you very much.
We're going to have to, the next time we schedule this, we're going to have to I can see. We're going to have to set aside more time.
And I'm really looking forward to talking to you about the ADHD aspect of it, about the documentary and how that's coming along. And actually,
I'd like to come to you. I've done one portable podcast before where I took my equipment and went somewhere.
Yeah, we could do something in my studio.
I would love to do that and take the time that we want to take, if it's an hour or if it's 3 hours, and just talk about your studio, your upcoming documentary. I would just love to.
Sure. Yeah. And actually, I do want to interview people who have not been diagnosed but suspect that they have.
Put me on your list,
I sure
please.
Will. Good.
Yeah.
When I was going into shiny new hyperfocus mode when we were setting up this project, I made a beautiful questionnaire, and I will send you that. So.
Do that. Send it. Like I said, this has been a wonderful thing. I want to ask you, like I explained to Jürgen, this is something I do with my guests. The reason you're my guest, Karyn, is because I've known for quite some time that there is something interesting about you. I knew that I could be inspired, motivated by you, and that I could learn something from you. And that has happened as of today.
Glad to hear it.
If you could look into that camera and say something that you think may inspire or motivate or give comfort to those people out there, kind of lean back so that you're still in the microphone, if you would, and look into the camera and say whatever's on your heart.
Yeah. I think it's don't be afraid. I think that...
Let's not lose the mic here.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay.
There we go.
There we go.
I think it's don't be fearful. Trust yourself. Trust other people. Know that other people probably like you more than you think. That you're probably okay. I think that's the most important thing. And to understand that every weakness that you have is the flip side of a strength. Right? You may be sort of messy and disorganized, but you're also really good at solving problems on your feet, right? At improvising. You may be a bad planner, but you're a good improviser, right? Or you may be a really good planner, but maybe you're not all that much fun, and your best friends are people who are more fun than you are, even though you have to kind of be the organizer in the group. So cut them some slack for being who they are. Cut yourself some slack for being who you are. I think everybody's okay. We're all just muddling through and doing the best we can with whatever we've been faced for. So have compassion with other people for just muddling through and not always getting everything right.
I love it.
And the same for yourself as well.
We are doing the best we can, and very often the best we can is good enough.
Yeah, I think so too.
Yeah.
And especially as a parent. Right?
Especially as a parent. Lastly, and again, this is something I ask of my guests. I'm going to say 3 words, and I'd like for you to complete the sentence. One sentence. You ready? Karyn Seroussi is
profoundly grateful.
Profoundly grateful. You know what you have, and you appreciate what you have, and you put it to use. Am I right?
Yes.
I've only known you for a few hours, but I think I'm right when I say that.
Yeah.
My preliminary assessment of you is that you know what you have, and you appreciate it, and you put it to use.
Every day.
I think that you are definitely a source of inspiration. I don't know how often people tell you that, but I'm going to tell you, you inspire me and motivate me. I love your business journey. My show is a business, so I can gain some insight and knowledge from the path that you have taken. So I thank you for that.
Okay, thanks.
And I haven't even seen a single one of your web video courses.
Oh, cool.
So I've learned something without even...
You'd like to be a power hoop instructor? You're welcome.
I was a Zumba instructor, remember? So
you'd be great.
I've got the potential here.
Actually, our Zumba instructors make the very best. And what I was going to say before, when you're talking about training and education, some of our absolute most successful fitness instructors were hairdressers, right? Or receptionists, or people who had never had a fitness background, but were just very good at bringing people together, very enthusiastic about what they were doing, very warm and inclusive, and really good at inspiring other people.
Well, it's if you're on fire for fitness, then you have a potential to teach it. And I'm on fire for fitness. I mean, I'm not in the best shape now, but I have a long career starting with playing football, American football, not soccer. And then a strength athlete, first a bodybuilder, and then most recently a power lifter. And I love it, and I love teaching that. I love putting my knowledge out there for other people to use.
Well, so with the exception of you're an introvert and I'm an extrovert, we actually are very, very similar.
I think so. There's a kinship here. Can I call you sister?
Sure, bro.
Let's do it, sister Karyn.
Oh no.
We have to wind this up, people. There are places to go, people to see, and things to do, and not all of it happens here on the camera or the microphone. But I do want to thank you all for being here. This has been Coming Home with John Allen. I'm your host. This is Karyn. Remember, everybody, my website, johnallenpod.com, JOHNALANPOD.com. That's where you can find the work that I do, as little as it is these days, but I'm back at it now. You can get my my ebook, not an ebook. What's that called?
Audiobook.
Thank you. Audiobook. And she hasn't even heard it, but it is an audiobook, people. It costs $5 a month for a subscription. And for that subscription, you get one chapter sent to you per week. I've enjoyed writing it, and I've enjoyed reading it into the microphone to distribute to you people. And I hope that you would enjoy listening to it. If you think that might be something for you, go to johnallenpod.com and set it up. $5. That's the best thing you can do to support my work, and I do appreciate it. Remember, not just here is there love, but out in the world, there's also love. Go out there and love and be loved and enjoy the process. Thanks, everybody. Bye.